Good evening, everyone. I will call our work session of February 8th, 2022, which is being held virtually via WebEx to order. We have one item on our agenda, and it's a joint City Council Planning Commission meeting where we have members of the I-494 project team who are going to present an update on the progress being made to date of the I-494 Airport to Highway 169 project, Visual Quality Advisory Committee, in their efforts to develop project's quality manual, which is going to guide the aesthetic qualities for the project and the corridor's visual elements. So I will pass it on to City Manager Katie Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor. And just a reminder, this is an informational meeting. We're looking for questions and feedback, and I'll have Director Asher introduce our presenters tonight.
Thank you, City Manager Rodriguez, and good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thanks for your time. So we've been talking about 494 and the vision project that goes from 169 to the airport for a long time. And so now that project one is underway, there's a fun aspect to that where the MnDOT team is looking for some visual quality guidance along the corridor. And so getting the public involved in what they would like to see along this corridor and on the local spots. There's local elements to this as well that'll come up. And so this, although project one isn't necessarily the whole corridor, this visual quality effort is. And so there's multiple cities. It's not just Bloomington and Richfield. Edina's in there as well, I mean Prairie. So I'll introduce the team. So I see Carl Weisenborn is here from SEH. He's on the project team guiding that. Lisa Austin with MnDOT, and they have a Center for Community Connections group, and that's the part that Lisa's from. And I see Amber's on the call as well, who everybody well knows that's been involved with the actual project itself. So I think this is an update. I know that there's been joint meetings without the City Council to date between the Community Service Commission and the Planning Commission, and there's been multiple. They meet every 2 weeks, just Visual Quality Advisory Committee. So this is an update on where they're at and an opportunity for feedback. So I think I'm going to pass it over to Lisa. Is that correct?
Yep, very good. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for the opportunity to share what we're doing here tonight. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides here. So let me know if you can see them.
Yes, we can see them, okay, Lisa.
Very good, thanks. And I'm going to try to get to a point where I can see the, oops, I'll try to see all of your faces in the comments too, so just bear with me here while I expand that screen. Very good, thanks. So I'll be doing most of the talking, but like I said, Carl is here to help answer questions, and so is Amber Blanchard. And I'm Lisa Austin with MnDOT in the Center for Community Connections. We're here today to talk about the Visual Quality Manual and what we're calling the Context Sensitive Solutions Framework. Just to remind folks what the process is, as Kristen mentioned, we have a Visual Quality Advisory Committee that meets, I said monthly there, but now we've accelerated and we're meeting a little more often as we get closer to the deadline. The Advisory Committee is made up of the cities along the corridor, the county, and MnDOT, and it has representatives from, elected officials, appointed folks, and residents in the community as well as staff. There's about 45 people on that committee, so it's a good, robust group that is advising the process. In addition to that advisory committee, we are also going out and getting public input direct from the public at 3 points along the process. So we did some public engagement in December and early January. We're out currently doing some engagement right now, and then we'll go out again in March when we're closer to the end of the visual quality process. We have 2 consultants working on this, as we mentioned, SEH and their landscape architects, Carl and his team. SEH is doing a lot of the work on the project, so very familiar with the whole thing. We've also engaged Forecast Public Art as a subcontractor to that, and they are helping with some of the creative process and a lot of the public engagement. And I know they've worked in some of the communities along the corridor, so they're familiar with some of the placemaking and public artwork that's happening in this area. So it's nice to have them on the team as well. And then the final deliverables for this will be the visual quality manual for the entire corridor. So from the airport to 169, and that will be used, as all of the projects are built now and into the future. So the aesthetics that are defined in there will be part of this project, but all the things that will be built into the future. And that will mostly, that'll include, the things that MnDOT can add to our infrastructure. So the architectural elements that go on bridges or on retaining walls and noise walls and things. It'll also include direction on what the landscaping should look like. The context sensitive solutions framework is a separate guide that we're writing that will have places where public art can be added later, and it might have interest from the community about adjacent public spaces and land use. We've done something like that similar to on the 35W project where, we defined what MnDOT can do in the visual quality manual, but then, where the public art and placemaking can happen at a later point. And that will mostly focus on things that are in project one. So in the future, there could be something similar done as things are built going forward. Any questions on that before I go on to the next slide?
Let's see, and since I can't see everyone, just please jump in if you can. So far, I'm not seeing any.
Okay, great.
Okay,
All right,
good.
so the visual quality process is following a real typical, step to get to the final deliverable. So first, we want to understand what's important in the community. So when we did that first level of engagement and the first conversations that we had with the advisory committee, we're just like, what's important about your community? What are some of the important destinations along here? What's the culture like? What's some of the history? What are some of the natural environments? We really wanted to understand what's important to the community along the corridor, both along the whole corridor and, spot areas for some localization. So we've completed that, and I'll give you some results of that in the next slides. The second phase is then to take some of those themes that came out and turn those into, designs that can be put in the architectural features of the project. So again, I'll show you some examples of that going forward, but you start turning those ideas and priorities and values into architectural elements. And then we have 4 different options that we're looking at right now, and then the final step is to choose one of those and then really apply those designs to the project. So that's a typical phase, the typical phases for any visual quality process, and we're following those here. You can see the first phase was in December and January. We're in phase 2 right now in February, and then we're marching to complete this by the end of March so that it can be ready for the design, build, bid, and construction. So to recap some of the things that we've heard in the first phase of engagement, we Forecast did a great job of getting out to the public. They went to farmers markets both in Richfield and Bloomington and talked to about 130 people, and those were nice because they could be a little bit more in-depth conversations and really hear what people had to say about their communities, and people had a chance to ask about the project as well. We did a survey on social media. It was pushed out through Facebook and communities. I think some of the cities along the corridor pushed that out to their social media outlets. We had 70 responses to that survey. We did a listening session, and with COVID that was virtual, so just like this, we had a virtual meeting, and 25 people participated in that, and that's again a really great way to have in-depth conversations. And then all that's a lot of digital outreach. We also put flyers out, and if you can appreciate, all the apartment buildings and small businesses, so Forecast handed out 600 flyers and posted flyers in the area along the corridor there. So what we heard, we did this what we call a Wiki Map, where people could go into a Google map with a layer in there that they could add points and comments about what was important along there. So people marked, important community spaces, important historic locations, so we can really see where there's clusters of things happening. And then they were also able to make comments about, where they'd like to see public art, or where they'd like to see better, pedestrian facilities, or where there were a lot of people, gathering and things. So that was really helpful information. The survey asked for people to, use a word or a phrase to describe their community. And so they said, take 3 words or 3 phrases that describe your community. And with all those responses, there were a lot of words. And so Forecast made this word cloud. You've probably seen word clouds before, and I think they did a really nice job of making this one graphically interesting. And the way word clouds work are, the more often a word is stated, the bigger the word is. So a lot of people said great, a lot of people said friendly, so those were some of the things that really bubbled up. You can read into some of the smaller words: fun, art, trees, people, good, shopping, lots of comments about the community. So as we went through those, we, kind of categorized them. So here's a bunch of the words that have to do with nature, weeds, I guess that's the nature, animals, bees, birds, butterflies, so a lot of themes on nature and the natural environment. There were a lot of words on people, welcoming, family, connectivity, loving, safe, diversity, so a lot of the words, kind of reflected, the people and the culture in the area. And then this was kind of interesting. They also organized the negative comments, because sometimes people said some negative things. So, noise, waste, ugly, traffic, so that was a good thing to look at too, to say, well, this is what we want the final result not to be some of these things. So that was another word cloud that Forecast put together for us to kind of look at what we don't want to have left behind. So the Visual Quality Advisory Committee looked at all those word clouds and looked at all the comments, and we came up with, kind of 3 categories of the type of comments that we were getting. So one, we were calling clear sky, green spaces, and blue water, kind of, all that natural environment, the things that people appreciate about the area. And then the second one was, people make the place, all the good things people were saying about the people and the activities and the services and the diversity and whatnot. And then the last, these weren't in any particular order, but the last one, there on the screen is, connections and connectivity. And, that's interesting because the proximity to the rest of the Twin Cities, a connection, there's connecting people to parks and people to schools, but the infrastructure we're putting in also connects people, and especially this project that has the 3 bridges that are being built and rebuilt with improvements to the bike and ped facilities. So connectivity was another interesting theme. So with those themes, the Carl and his team, the landscape architects, had the challenge to figure out, like, how do you turn those things into, designs? And they came up, well, I don't know, Carl, was it something like 20 designs that your group came up with, and then you narrowed it down to 12 that you wanted to bring forward to the advisory committee. Some of the narrowing down there came into things that were buildable and cost effective, and so the 12 that kind of made that cut were presented to the Visual Quality Advisory Committee, and these are just little thumbnails of all of those, but the advisory committee then picked 4 that we wanted to bring forward to develop a little bit further. So Carl and his team have been looking at additional architectural elements. What would these things look like on railings or other features, but also to get input from the public. So that's what's right now is out. If you've seen the surveys or if you've seen some of the outreach, we've got 4 themes that we're asking the public to give feedback on. So I'll go through those now. To start with, we wanted people to think about what's currently out in the corridor. So if you've should look familiar. This random batten is the pattern that's on the retaining walls and bridge abutments and things in the quarter right now, and that's been used, I don't know, 20 or more years has been the design. There are some newer things that have used that pattern. I think maybe the Lindale Bridge isn't that old, and then the new interchange down at 169. So this pattern will be in the corridor in some spots for a long time into the future, but in some of those older places that are going to be rebuilt as part of this project, we'll be removing those and putting in whatever the new design is. So we wanted people to think about that a little bit as they looked at the other designs, knowing that this will be out there in some spots for a while. So this was the first theme that made the cut for the next phase. So winds and waves is what we nicknamed it. And what you're seeing here is a mock-up of what it might look like on a noise wall. The different coloration here is just like the illusion of shadow. So it would really just be different textures. There'd be some things were deeper and some things were raised. So the darker lines are not colored concrete. They're just shadows of the different depths and textures. Something like the random batten here, where you can see it appears to be lines, but those are shadows, and so it'd be the same kind of concept here. So, and some of the photos that the team looked at for inspiration are down here in the corner. What that might look like on a retaining wall or a bridge, are illustrated on this page here, and you can see, scale wise, that's how big a car would be next to the bridge and next to the retaining wall. I guess I'll go back to the other side. One other thing to mention is, on this one here, there's a person standing next to it. So this is a mock-up of a noise wall, and this texture can be put on either the highway side or on the neighborhood or community side. And it can flip-flop. So for a while it could be on the highway side, and then in another section it could be on the neighborhood side. It can't be on both sides just because of the way they're constructed. You can imagine you're pouring concrete into a mold, and the texture's on the bottom of the mold, and so the top of the mold is smooth. So it can go on one side or the other. And that'll be one of the things that we ask the public to talk about, is which side do you want that texture on? Do you want it to, flip back and forth and sometimes be on the neighborhood side and sometimes be on the highway side? Any questions on that so far? Okay.
Do we have any questions from folks? Again, if you want to just jump in, since I can't see everybody here.
Mayor, I have a question about the Visual Quality Committee's work.
Go ahead, Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
Thank you. So I'm just curious, and I was at virtually the February 1st meeting as well, and I'm just curious. I know certain things have kind of already been determined, like we would definitely be doing bare concrete with one of these patterns and not like a brick or stacked limestone imposed texture. You discussed in that meeting that wood was not being considered. Was the committee consulted on that? Did they choose that, or was this sort of predefined for them and all they were consulted about was weeding down those 12 patterns?
I don't know, Amber, if that's something you can answer about the materials that we've chosen, concrete versus wood or other things. I think some of that has to do with the efficacy of on a noise wall, reducing noise, right?
Yeah, I can respond to that. Yes, the materials were predetermined. One of the things is the Metro District is going to all concrete noise walls throughout as a general practice, because we've had a lot of maintenance issues with the wood noise walls, with the staining and deterioration over time. So from a maintenance and life cycle perspective, we're going to concrete. So that wasn't really talked about. The other thing, council member, you mentioned was brick and limestone and kind of veneers. Those tend to be a lot, really, really expensive, and would be outside of our aesthetic budget for each of the walls and the bridges and that sort of thing. So that's why we're kind of looking at form liner. Now, if like Richfield or Bloomington would be open to paying the extra cost for that, we could look into it. But right now we're trying to keep everything within budget.
if I could clarify that, the Crosstown Commons rebuild, which was included in Richfield, does have that texture. Did the cities pay extra for that, or did MnDOT cover that cost at the time? I mean, it's fine if you don't know that off.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I can look into that though.
Okay. I guess, you know, it's just troubling to see people putting in the work and coming with good ideas, and it seems like all the decisions of substance have been made for them already and dictated by the budget. So I appreciate this. I appreciate the work of the committee and the people who showed up in the public, but it just feels like misleading public engagement when these pretty substantial decisions, like what material the wall is going to be, if there is a wall approved, have already been made for them. So it particularly when you talk about gathering feedback on what's important to people, the history, the culture, the environment, and the connections, and all that seems to inform is which of these slightly different patterns we're going to etch into a bare wall of concrete. It just feels, it's very frustrating to me because it feels like a misleading form of public engagement. The one other thing I get just more answerable of a comment or question is who maintains these different things. If there's tagging on the wall and stuff, is that the city's problem in the end, or is that MnDOT's?
Lisa, I can answer that too. If it's in our right of way, then it would be MnDOT.
Okay. And I did ask this during the public meeting as well, but landscaping is to be determined at this point. Is that right?
Yep, so the landscaping will be part of the plans. So when the final visual quality manual comes out, it will show locations for landscaping. The landscaping will be a separate project that's put in a couple years after the construction is done. And my understanding of why that's further out is so that to make sure that there's no repairs that need to get done or little final tweaks to the infrastructure. You don't want people driving equipment over, stomping all over it, and so they want the project to be done and things to be well established before we go back in and plant. So the landscaping will be a separate project, but it'll the locations and the type and the designs for it will be part of the visual quality manual.
And the one other question I had about the concrete material, and as you can detect, I'm concerned about that. We've talked a lot about how this area of Richfield, particularly thinking of north side of 494, Portland Avenue East, has really been overlooked in city planning and public planning in general. This is a lot of Richfielders live there, mostly low-income renters who live there. If a noise wall is approved through the appropriate process, I'm concerned that what we're giving them is a huge wall of bare concrete, the kind of thing that if that were a land use application, we would never approve because that is too plain and too ugly and too, frankly, dehumanizing to live next to, although I think it's probably still an improvement over living next to the highway noise. So my question is, you mentioned this is universal, and I spent a good amount of time on Google Maps, Street View, trying to find even a single example of a concrete noise wall right next to apartment buildings like that. Is there any example that I could go take a look at just so I can get a sense, as a representative of Richfield, what that's going to look like for Richfielders?
Amber, do you know of any examples that are around the metro? I haven't.
No, because we haven't used concrete noise walls in the metro area yet. There are noise walls that are concrete down in the Rochester area that are likely next to apartment buildings. You can go down there. Some of those still look as good as they did 20 years ago when we installed them. And a lot of them have vegetation on them and vines. So I can get some pictures. Otherwise, feel free to look at Google Earth too of Highway 52 and you can see a lot what I'm talking about.
Thanks, that's helpful. And then that was one other question. So it is, if landscaping plans call for it, vines are allowed to grow on it, and that doesn't require that stay clear or anything?
That's right, yep.
Okay, thanks, that's all I got.
Oh, thank you for these questions, it's really helpful. And I'll just add the context sensitive solutions guide will look at some of those things too, and it's possible that murals could be added to some sections of the noise walls too at some later date. So that's another way to soften the look of that. So landscaping, vines, and then maybe some murals in some key spots are something else that could be discussed. Okay, so wind and waves was, got a hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Council Member Hayford O'Leary. I echo a lot of his sentiments and concerns. And this is not not personal to either you, Ms. Austin or Blanchard, but the legacy of our city and how it developed and how we've chosen to use sound barriers in the past, and how we've taken a highway and isolated, roughly 10 to 12% of our community from the parks on the other side of the highway. And we start there. We start in that moment, in that context. And so I appreciate the opportunity for murals. So I don't think I have too much more to add than what Councilmember Hayford O'Leary said, but I just want to echo that just so it's clear that it's not just my colleague, but just a really sincerely and generally held, at least to my voice, but I suspect with the rest of our council, just how sensitive and important the aesthetics in this area are. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Troutman. Commissioner Quam, and before you jump in, Commissioner Quam, I just wanted to make a correction for our staff, if they could please note. I mistakenly said it was a joint meeting between the City Council and the Planning Commission, and we also have our community service commissioners here as well. So if we could, sorry on my behalf for that oversight, and then also if you could just make sure in the notes that that's clearly stated. Go ahead, Chair Quam. Are others having trouble hearing Chair Quam? Yep. You want to try again? No, we did hear you. It was just very quiet.
Can you hear me?
Yes, maybe just try to speak up a little louder.
It's a brand new computer, so it's the first time I'm testing it, I guess. I need to figure out the audio. Let me do this. Does that help? Well, anyway, I'll be quick. Just that whatever is chosen, I hope that it's something that, like, Lisa is, it can last the test of decades, because nothing looks worse than things that get pale, cruddy, 10, 20 years later. So if it is like murals, I hope there's a plan to keep them, because I'd rather have concrete with vines, because those are sort of perennial, than something that looks great at the outset but looks cruddy in 10, 15 years. Okay, I'll stop. Thanks.
That's important. Thank you for that.
Other comments from folks? Again, just please jump in because I can't see everybody.
Mayor, this is Kristen Asher.
Go ahead.
Hi, I just, in response to that, my understanding, and maybe the team can clarify, that any of that art, murals, anything, even the landscaping is going to be on the city to maintain into the future. Is that correct?
Yep, and I do have another slide on some art policy stuff too. So we can cover that a little bit more then. But that's right. MnDOT will allow art on the right of way, but the transportation funding that we have doesn't allow for us to pay for any of the artwork. So if a local government wants to add some artwork at a later date, we'll allow it. And like you said, Kristen, then that part of that is to maintain it and care for it. And there's some great examples of mosaic murals that do hold up well. So there are some good examples of things that can be maintained and do last, but that is an important consideration.
I do have two other quick questions, and I promise they're briefer than my last ones. One question is, if the noise wall is not approved, what would go in its place? Like, would it be like a nice, iron rail style fence, or would it just be like the bare chain link?
Amber, can you address that one?
I certainly can. Yeah, it'll be chain link, and we've been using the black vinyl coated as our standard. So
Okay.
that's right now what would be put back instead of a noise wall if the noise walls weren't voted in.
So in cases like Minneapolis where they have used that, or St. Paul, that's on the local government to fund the difference?
For the chain link, or for?
When they do use that, I believe it's aluminum iron look fence in lieu of a noise
Oh
wall.
yeah, anything above our standard chain link would be an additional cost for the city. Yeah, that's
Okay.
correct.
My other question, so landscaping, Director Asher mentioned that we are on the hook to maintain it. Does MnDOT contribute to the initial cost of landscaping, or is it 100% the city install and everything?
So it depends on where the landscaping is. If it's within our right of way, generally speaking, MnDOT will take care of the maintenance of the landscaping. If it's outside of the right of way, obviously it would be private business or city owned if that was the case. So most of the time it's on the inside, or excuse me, it's MnDOT's maintenance. If there are plantings or that sort of thing, then on some of the bridges, which could be a possibility in some of these locations, perhaps that typically is a shared cost for maintenance.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Great. Well, I'll go ahead. I can. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Mayor.
Are there other questions? And we can keep asking and discussing. Because how many more slides do you guys have, just so I can gauge?
There's a few more. I've got some more of the graphics here, and then some more of the future steps. So I can continue if you'd like.
Yep. So yep, let's keep continuing, and then if folks have more questions, please jump in.
Great. Thank you. So the waves and wind is one of the designs that are moving forward. And then another one is the sunrise and sunset. And you can, going off of the themes that came out of the public engagement, people like nature. So these are some of the inspirational images for sunrise and sunset. And then what it looks like with a noise wall and a bridge abutment. And then another one is lake beds. So taking a topo map with the depths on lakes, and some of the comments we've had on this one are, it does really reflect Minnesota, and some of the maps people looked at were of the area there. Again, that's what it looks like on the retaining wall and the abutment. And then the last one is reverb. That's just our nickname for it, but kind of reflecting sort of those organic shapes and waves, and with the vertical lines that tie it back to the existing random batten that's in the corridor. Could look like clouds and things too. So those are the four that the advisory committee wanted to continue looking at. And if you've attended any of the outreach or looked at the survey, these are the questions that we're asking people. What do you think of these concepts? Do they reflect the value of the place in your community? And then we asked people to kind of pick their top two. We're not doing a vote or a ranking of all of them, but we kind of wanted to see, what the public, which ones the public likes best. So far, lake beds and waves and wind seem like they're the most popular, but the survey is not closed yet, and we're not done with all of our engagement. But those are some of the early feedback. I think sunrise, sunset's a close third, and reverb's not getting as much traction. And we can come back and kind of discuss more of these two if there's time at the end. The current engagement that we're doing is we did the listening session on February 1st. We'll do another listening session on March 1st once we've narrowed it down to one design. There was a pop-up event at the Menards last Saturday, and then we'll be at the Bloomington Farmers Market again. Another online survey, flyers again being posted all around the neighborhood, and then social media. In addition, we did send out postcards to residents in Bloomington and Richfield. I think that some of them went out a little bit later, so they weren't in time for the February 1st listening session, but they should land in time for people to learn about the pop-up events and the survey. And then certainly the March 1st listening session, the cards should all land in time for that. And then, as terms of the schedule goes, we've got, the advisory committee meets again on the 17th, the 10th, and the 31st, and we should have a final version of the visual quality manual and the framework plan by that. And oh, I guess I don't have the slide in there about the public art. Sorry about that. I thought I did. Yeah, I can, if people are interested, I can go find another presentation where I've got some examples of public art that's been left in place. But yeah, down in Hastings, there's a cool mural that's on the side of a bridge abutment, and it's mosaic with stones in it. And again, the city came in later and added that piece, but it related to the themes that were on the rest of the visual quality, so that they kind of tied together and helped tell the story. So great. So that's all the slides I have. We can continue talking about what folks think of these ideas. Another thing that if we have time, we might be interested in hearing about is, are there any spot locations where you'd want to make sure that we focused on and made, applied some of these architectural elements in a special way? I know there's a new pedestrian bridge at Chicago, and is that a spot where we really want to pay special attention and make sure that the visual quality and the context sensitive solutions ideas are highlighted. So we can spend some time talking about that, or we can spend some more time talking about these concepts. Or if there's any other questions.
Any questions that folks want to ask now? Go ahead, Councilmember Whalen.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I want to circle back to the comment on just with it being stamped concrete, or not stamped, form concrete, that it only being possible to have a design on one side, that's pretty concerning, especially I'm repeating some of the concern from the other council members, but I was just looking a bit at some of the noise walls and bridges near, well, mostly the noise walls in the Rochester area, and I guess I don't know if that is stamped or what the situation is, but there is a little bit of a pattern on both sides, and that seems infinitely better than either the freeway traffic or the residents who live right next to it looking at a pattern. I know there's certainly even just some of the like wooden retaining walls that kind of alternate which side of the posts the wall is on to add a little bit of, I'd imagine that has acoustic property, but also just visual interest. And I guess I'm wondering if looking at these patterns, they don't necessarily look like, but I'm also not an artist, that you could like alternate a section and it would still feel like a cohesive pattern that then would appear on both sides. Do you have any thoughts on how that would work, or would it be possible to see some visuals of that?
Yep. So I'll let Carl jump in too, but that is, if we hear strong feedback that people want to see them alternated, then that would be another step in the design. And Carl, I don't know if your team has started thinking about that a little bit, or if you can comment a little bit on how you'd handle that.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa, and thanks, Council Member, for the discussion or the suggestions. So the new standard that MnDOT is evolving to, or going to, with the concrete noise wall, precast concrete panel noise wall, it's called flatbed casting. So the form is basically, it's on a flatbed, form is up, and you pour the concrete into the form, and then it's screened off on the upside. So it is potentially a good canvas for a mural. To your point though, what we've been showing, typically, we've been showing flat elevations, whether it's a retaining wall, whether it's a noise wall, or whether it's the wing wall, so the triangle that comes down into the corridor. We've been showing a kind of a prototypical application, and what we are proposing to do is that once we're down to one design, that we would explore in much greater detail how those could play out and how they could be, as Lisa said. So we've been, for example, the noise walls, we've been showing typically 12 panels, 3, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4. We've been showing 3, 3, 3, 3 for 12 panels as in effect. There you go. Thanks, Lisa. So there is or any one of these. So that's kind of our template elevation to show. And the devil's kind of in the details. Some of the patterns would lend themselves to the pattern is shop fabricated, comes out to the project, and it's actually inversed. So there is a way that you can get more mileage out of the design, so to speak. This one, lake beds, as it's represented here, is unique. These 12 panels are all unique. But we realize that once you're into the details, it's not common that noise wall would have a set top elevation. So we would look at how the noise wall would step down, how it would meet other structures. And we would, again, kind of do that in a prototypical, or you could say stereotypical way, to get that information into the design build documents that are due to MnDOT, are deliverable, as Lisa said on the second slide, I think, of the presentation. Get all that information to MnDOT so they can get it in place for the design build contractor and consultant team. The kind of that's the base information that they'll use to play out the design and do actually the construction documents, the very specific construction documents that are done for a project like this.
Yep. And specifically about alternating them, you know, if there's a desire to alternate them, the design would be done in a way that it doesn't look goofy to have it, you know, partially on one side and partially on the other. So you would, you know, you'd make some version of it that could flip back and forth. Is that right?
Yes.
Yep.
Other questions, council member or anyone else?
Other questions from folks?
This is Kristen Asher again, Mayor. I just was curious, I think maybe it would be good at one of the upcoming advisory committee meetings to really talk about that, because I would assume we'd want both Bloomington and Richfield and the other cities along the corridor to understand that it's only on one side or that it needs to be alternating. And I'm thinking alternating is probably what Richfield's going to be pushing for. So I think it should maybe be intentionally talked about at that committee meeting.
Thank you, Kristen. That's a good idea.
Can you say more, this is Councilmember Supple, about what you were saying about talking about spots that we think we should have different landscaping or arts and that kind of stuff? Because I know I've been on this committee and I'd like to take people's feedback if they can give some for us.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so here, trying to get to my other screen here. I talk and go at the same time. So great. Can people see my screen still? Okay, great. So this is the homework that we've given the Visual Quality Advisory Committee, and Carl, I'm not sure if that went out today or if it's going out tomorrow morning. So
it's on my screen right here.
So
the
for those
email
of you
is composed. It's going.
If you haven't received it yet, you will tomorrow morning. So the homework will be for folks to look at the maps of the project and think about where they want to see more focus on the corridor. So this list of the surface finishes, pavement colors, pedestrian lighting, railings, landscaping. So thinking about all these different attributes, and then looking at the project. And if you've seen some of the other presentations from Amber, this should look a little bit familiar. The blue lines are where there could be noise wells. Again, those will be voted on by the residents that live near the noise walls, but these are the places where there could potentially be a noise wall. The pink lines are where there will be retaining walls, and those are not optional. And then as we continue moving through the project, the wet and dry ponds are noted here, and those would be places where additional landscaping around them, could enhance the looks. And then continuing through the places where there's a gold outline or where there's new bridges. And so those are spots where there's, if it's a bridge with pedestrian facilities, there'd be, nice railings that could be put on them, or, there'll be bridge abutments and other features on the bridges that we can focus on. So the advisory committee is, again, being asked to look at this and think about spots that are really important. And, you know, I can just imagine that, you know, as we get to this pedestrian bridge, I can imagine that folks will say, oh, well, this is a, you know, that's the pedestrians move at a slower pace than the cars driving at 60 some miles an hour on the highway. So, you know, let's focus on this and make the railings really nice, and, you know, some plantings around here. And, you know, should there be a bench so that somebody can sit and rest when they've gotten to the end of the, you know, everything. So that's the type of thing that we want to, you know, get the advisory committee to comment on. Or, you know, I know there's the park up along here, and so are there, you know, are there some ways that you want to make sure there's a gateway to the park, that there's some landscaping along here that sort of leads people to know there's a park up there, or signage or things like that. So if there's any locations along here that are special or that you want some special attention to, that would be, you know, great to hear people's thoughts. And I can flip around to any of the other slides if you want me to move around.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hayford O'Leary here. Just one spot I would point to is that Portland area, and actually wasn't even aware there'd be a retaining wall there until seeing this slide, but the northeast corner of Portland and 494, just given that, you know, there's potential redevelopment, especially on the other side, that's a large visual impact to people entering the community. Yep, exactly. So I would hope that that retaining wall looks as nice as a retaining wall possibly, although I guess I don't know what direction that even is, if the roadway's higher or either way, it should look nice.
Right. Yeah, and that's the new exit ramp here, and so coming up on that side, yeah. I'm making some notes here, thank you.
Other comments, feedback from folks, please jump in.
I think just would echo, it sounds like you've already heard it, but the obvious around the pedestrian bridge. And I think especially that part is what I was thinking of when I was raising my concern about bare concrete, that whole section has got a ton of families and a ton of people will use that. There's the city's putting in a new bike trail along there, that between landscaping, what the sound wall, if it's approved, looks like, and the retaining walls, yeah, just hope that is a more whimsical space than just a bunch of bare concrete.
Yeah, when I got assigned to work on this, it was this fall, so it was before the snow flew, and I walked the whole thing from 12th to Portland, across Nicollet, and I crossed the existing Ped Bridge, you know, just to kind of get a feel for that area. And, you know, I was really struck by the number of apartments in here and the number of people, and a lot of people walking back and forth to, you know, shop over on the other side here. So I totally understand what you're saying. That's a very important area.
Hello, this is Ben Surma, Richfield Planning Commission. I'm brand new to this process and this commission. I just want to clarify what the timeline is for all of these projects, both the 494 35W intersection and these various bridges we're talking about right now.
I'm gonna shout out to you, Amber. You want to tackle that one with the timeline?
Certainly, I have
Yeah, I was
my
gonna say,
family
you know-
eating behind me, so I won't turn on my camera. But yeah, so the work on these bridges at Nicollet, Portland, and 12th, and the pedestrian bridge, as well as the work on 494 west of this location and the 35W 494 bridge, will all be part of what's called our first construction project, or Project 1. And that will all be let and constructed at the same time over a span of 3 years. And our letting is scheduled for 2023, and the contractor will start construction that summer. And we have several commitments that we made to the cities as well as Hennepin County. We're going to construct in this Portland, Nicollet, 12th area first. Primarily the Ped Bridge will go first. and then the other bridges will follow suit with Portland and then Nicollet and 12th in that order. So it will be a 3-year project. We're hoping to get the community impacts done as quickly as we possibly can, but it is going to be a span of 3 years between 2023 and 2026.
Other comments or questions from folks?
I had another thought to share. I've seen some preliminary drawings that Carl and his team have done in carrying those themes into other architectural elements. And some of the railings are really interesting. They're very unique and, carry those kind of like lake, if you can imagine how would lake beds carry into a railing, there's some really neat ideas. So I wish we were farther along with that so we could show you those, because those don't look like, concrete. I mean, that the railings aren't going to help the noise wall piece, but I think there'll be some other features in these designs that once you see the final product will be more than just the concrete. There'll be some neat things in the final version.
Mayor, this is Kristen Asher again. If we're going to be wrapping up soon, I just did want to mention that we'll be coming back to this group again. Another joint meeting is identified for Monday, March 28th. So if it's not on everyone's calendar, and I think that'll be towards the end. I think, Lisa, that will be kind of presenting what the plan is. So, but you're encouraged to attend any other input sessions you'd like. Obviously, then we'll keep getting the word out on those.
Thank you, Director Asher, and to the entire team for presenting this to us. And I don't have too much to say. In addition to what the other commissioners and council members said, I think those comments are, right on point. These types of projects are once in a generation or multiple generation type of project for our community that we have the ability to influence and decide now. And so I think, the requests and the feedback definitely align with the importance of that, and layered upon the importance of the communities and our families that live along these spaces that are going to be utilizing these bridges and be walking here is super important too. So I don't have anything to add, and I'm really excited that we get to be a part of this. I'm glad that there was a committee, that we have community members that have been a part of it as well. So I don't have additional information or additional feedback in addition to what folks said. Any final comments before we adjourn our meeting from folks? Scrolling through to see if I can see any hands up. No, looks like we have none. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending our meeting. Thank you for the presentation. I will adjourn our meeting, and I will see the City Council at 7 p.m. Thank you, everyone.